My husband emptied my mother's inheritance account while on a spiritual wellness retreat with his secretary, thinking I was too grief-stricken to notice the missing $327,000. He didn't know I'd already moved half the money before he ever touched the account. He didn't know I'd hired a forensic accountant 3 weeks earlier, and he definitely didn't know that his precious secretary's husband was my cousin Derek's brother-in-law, who'd been feeding me information since day one. This is how I turned his grand theft into his grand humiliation, and why he now delivers packages for a living while I sip champagne in the house he thought he'd steal from me. My mother's death certificate was still warm when Richard started asking about the will. We'd been married 23 years, built a landscaping business from nothing, raised 2 daughters who barely called anymore. But the moment she passed, something shifted in his eyes, like he was calculating square footage instead of sharing my grief. "You should let me handle the estate paperwork," he said, rubbing my shoulders while I sorted through her jewelry box. "You're too emotional right now, sweetheart. These lawyers, they'll take advantage." I'd spent 30 nights sleeping in hospital chairs, spoon-feeding her applesauce, singing her the hymns she taught me as a child. Richard visited exactly twice, both times checking his phone for urgent client emails. But suddenly he was concerned about lawyers taking advantage. The inheritance was substantial. Mother had lived like a church mouse, but saved like a queen. $327,000, plus her house in Riverside, plus her investment portfolio. She'd worked 2 jobs for 40 years, clipped every coupon, worn the same coat for decades. All for me, her only child. "I'm grateful you want to help," I told Richard, "but I need to do this myself. It's my way of saying goodbye." His jaw tightened. That should have been my first real warning. The second was when Melissa started working late. Melissa, his 28-year-old secretary with the yoga instructor license and the spray tan that left orange marks on his collar, the same collar I'd been washing for over 2 decades. The retreat announcement came 3 weeks after the funeral. "It's a men's wellness workshop in Sedona," Richard explained, packing his newest golf shirts. "Leadership through mindfulness. Jim from the country club recommended it. It'll help me process everything." Jim from the country club later told me he'd never heard of any wellness workshop, but by then I already knew exactly where Richard was going, and it wasn't to find inner peace. I'd been suspicious enough to move $163,500 to a separate account 2 days after Mother died, telling myself I was being paranoid. Turns out, paranoia is just pattern recognition when you've been married to a liar for 2 decades. 2 decades of building Mitchell landscaping, and I could write a book about everything I gave up. When Richard's landscaping dream was just sketches on napkins, I worked double shifts at the hospital while pregnant with our first daughter. My feet swelled so bad I had to wear men's shoes, but I never missed a shift. When his first business loan got rejected, I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one she wore on her wedding day, to buy his first commercial mower. I remember the August when the business almost went under. A client sued over damaged irrigation lines, and we were looking at bankruptcy. I emptied my teacher's retirement fund without blinking. "We're partners," I told him when he promised to pay me back. "What's mine is yours." He kissed me then, like I'd saved his life. Maybe I had. There were smaller sacrifices too. The art classes I never took because weekends meant helping with estimates. The trip to Paris I canceled because we needed a new truck. The master's degree I abandoned because someone had to answer phones while he built our reputation. I became the invisible backbone of Mitchell Landscaping, the woman who made sure invoices went out and suppliers got paid while Richard glad-handed at the Chamber of Commerce. Our daughters, Sarah and Emma, grew up seeing me as the one who handled everything. When Richard missed Sarah's piano recitals for client dinners, I recorded them on my phone so he could watch later. He never did. When Emma broke her arm at soccer practice and Richard was unreachable at a conference, I held her hand through x-rays and casting alone. But I told myself this was marriage. This was building something together. When the business finally took off, when we landed the country club contract and then the municipal parks, Richard bought himself a Corvette. "You deserve something too," he said, tossing me a jewelry catalog. I asked for a week in Mother's beach cottage instead, just me and her, talking about life while her mind was still sharp. The thing about sacrifice is that it becomes invisible over time. Like how you don't notice wallpaper fading until you move a picture frame. Richard stopped seeing what I gave up because I made it look so easy. The late nights balancing books while he entertained clients. The birthdays I spent alone because networking is working, baby. When Melissa started as his secretary, I trained her myself, showed her the filing system, taught her his coffee preferences, explained how to handle his moods. She gushed about what an amazing businessman he was. "You're so lucky," she said, that vanilla perfume already clinging to her clothes. I smiled and said yes, I supposed I was. The headaches started the week after Mother's diagnosis. Stress, the doctor said, completely normal for a caregiver. But Richard acted like I had terminal brain cancer. "You're falling apart, Linda," he said one morning, watching me take aspirin. "Maybe you should see someone, a therapist or, I don't know, someone who handles these situations." These situations, like my mother dying, was a scheduling conflict. He started documenting everything. I'd find him taking notes when I cried over old photos. He'd ask pointed questions. "Did you forget to pay the water bill?" When it auto-drafted like always. "Are you sure you locked the door?" When he knew I double-checked everything. Once I caught him photographing my medicine cabinet. "I'm worried about you," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You're not yourself lately. Yesterday you put milk in the pantry." "Once," I said, while caring for my dying mother on 2 hours of sleep. But he kept pushing. Suggested I sign a power of attorney, just in case something happens while you're at the hospital. Mentioned how overwhelming estate planning could be for someone already dealing with grief. Even brought home brochures for grief counseling centers that, I later learned, specialized in cognitive evaluation. Melissa became his echo. "Mr. Mitchell is just so concerned," she'd say when dropping off papers. "He tells me how hard this must be for you. All those decisions, all that paperwork, it's too much for one person." She'd pat my hand with her manicured nails, leaving that cloying vanilla scent that I'd started smelling on Richard's clothes. The retreat conversation happened 2 days after Mother passed. Richard sat me down with tea. He never made me tea, and pulled out a glossy folder. "Desert Mountain Wellness Center," it read. "A transformative experience for mind, body, and spirit." "It's expensive," he said, "but I need this. Watching you go through this loss, it's affected me too. I need to process, to grow, to become a better support system for you." He held my hands, looked into my eyes with practiced sincerity. "Melissa found it. She's very into wellness trends, suggested it might help me help you." The dates coincided perfectly with when Mother's estate would clear probate. What a coincidence. 10 days seems long," I said, testing him. 8 to 10, depending on the program. I know it's bad timing, but grief doesn't follow schedules. He squeezed my hands. "I'll come back renewed, ready to help you through everything. And you'll have full access to all our accounts while I'm gone, of course. We're partners, remember?" Partners. The word tasted like ash, but I smiled, nodded, told him yes. Of course, he should go find himself in the desert. He kissed my forehead like a priest giving last rites. The morning Richard left for his retreat, he made me breakfast. Scrambled eggs with too much salt, burnt toast, orange juice in my favorite mug. "I want you to rest while I'm gone," he said, loading his suitcase into the Corvette. "Don't worry about the business. Melissa has everything under control." I waved from the doorway like a good wife. Counted to 300 after his car disappeared, then called Derek. "He just left," I said. "She took a personal day," Derek replied. "Told Tom she's visiting her sick aunt in Phoenix." Derek's wife is Tom's sister. Family gatherings must have been awkward for Melissa, sitting across from me at Thanksgiving while planning to steal my life. But she didn't know Derek had been watching her for weeks, that Tom had started questioning her over time, that her web of lies was already fraying. The inheritance hit my account on day 3 of Richard's retreat. $327,000, transferred from Mother's estate lawyer at 9:47 a.m. By 10:15 a.m., $163,500 was gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize, then bounced through two more before landing in a shell company called Desert Bloom Investments. I sat at my kitchen table, watching it happen in real time on my laptop. Each transfer documented, screen recorded, time-stamped. The forensic accountant I'd hired, Patricia Chen, was doing the same from her office. "He's not even trying to hide it," she said over the phone. "This is amateur hour." The house deed was next. Richard had forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, transferring Mother's Riverside property to himself alone. The notary seal was fake. Patricia confirmed it within minutes. He'd used a stamp he bought online, probably thinking grief made me too stupid to check. But the real betrayal came in the emails. Patricia had legally accessed our business accounts during her financial audit, and there they were. 6 months of messages between Richard and Melissa. Not just the affair. I'd suspected that since the vanilla perfume started coming home with him. But the planning, the detailed discussions about Linda's mental state and establishing incapacity, the spreadsheets calculating my net worth, the 5-year plan that started with stealing my inheritance and ended with divorcing me for abandonment once they'd drained everything. "Once she signs the POA, we move everything," Richard wrote. "She trusts me completely. Grief makes people vulnerable." "What about the daughters?" Melissa had asked. "They barely visit. They'll believe whatever I tell them about their mother's breakdown." I printed every email, made copies, sent backups to 3 different lawyers. Then I sat back and waited for Richard to dig his hole deeper, because while he was playing checkers, I'd already mastered chess. The money he stole? It was from the account I'd left visible for him to find. The real inheritance, the part I'd moved, was already safely tucked away, along with every other asset I'd spent 2 decades building. That night, alone in our house, I finally let myself feel it. 23 years reduced to spreadsheets and shell companies. I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by printed emails, each one a dagger to whatever love I'd still harbored. "Linda's too trusting," he'd written to Melissa. "Always has been. It's almost sad how easy this will be." I found myself laughing, that broken kind of laugh that's first cousin to sobbing. Easy? He had no idea who he'd married. The woman who learned accounting from library books to save our business, who negotiated with suppliers in hospital waiting rooms, who built credit from nothing while he spent money we didn't have on image. The photo albums mocked me from the shelf. Our wedding, him spinning me on the dance floor while my daddy cried happy tears. Sarah's birth. Richard cutting the cord with shaking hands. That trip to Yellowstone where Emma lost her first tooth and Richard carried her on his shoulders for miles. When did that man disappear? Or was he always fiction, a character I'd written over the real person because I needed the story to be true? I called Sarah in Seattle. "Hey, Mom," she answered, distracted. I could hear traffic, life happening around her. "Just wanted to hear your voice," I said. "Is Dad there? He hasn't returned my calls." "He's at a wellness retreat, finding himself." She laughed. Good for him. Maybe he'll finally deal with his control issues. If only she knew. After we hung up, I walked through the house like a ghost. The kitchen where I'd cooked 10,000 meals. The living room where we'd opened Christmas presents. The bedroom where we'd made love and plans and promises that meant nothing to him now. Every room held evidence of a life I'd thought was real. I ended up in Mother's chair, the one thing of hers I'd brought home. It still smelled like her lavender soap. "What would you do?" I asked the empty room, but I already knew. She didn't suffer fools or forgive thieves. "A snake in the grass gets the hoe," she used to say. The darkest moment came at 3 a.m. I found myself standing at the window, watching the streetlights flicker, wondering if this was what going crazy felt like. Richard wanted people to think I was unstable. Maybe I was. Maybe any woman would be, discovering her life was a con game and she was the mark. But then I saw Mother's reflection in the window. Not really, just memory playing tricks. "Baby girl," she seemed to say, "you've got work to do." By sunrise, the tears were done, the self-pity packed away. I made coffee, strong and black, and called Patricia Chen. How much evidence do we have? Enough to bury him twice over. Good, I said. Let's make it 3 times just to be sure. The plan crystallized over that pot of coffee. I wasn't going to be the grieving widow who discovered her husband's betrayal after the fact. I was going to be the woman who saw it coming, documented everything, and prepared a response that would leave Richard Mitchell wishing he'd taken a real retreat to a monastery, preferably one with a vow of poverty. I called Margaret Winters, the attorney Mother had used for her will. I need a litigation specialist, I said. The best you know. What kind of litigation? The kind that handles fraud, theft, elder abuse by proxy, and conspiracy. She gave me 3 names. I hired all of them. Next, I visited our bank. Not the joint accounts Richard was draining, but the safety deposit box he didn't know existed. Inside, copies of every financial document from our marriage, the real deed to Mother's house, and something else. The original partnership papers for Mitchell Landscaping, clearly stating my 50% ownership. Richard had been telling clients he was sole proprietor for years. Time to correct that misconception. The forensic audit Patricia started revealed more than just theft. Richard had been skimming from the business for 18 months, hiding money in accounts under Melissa's maiden name. He'd invoiced phantom jobs, collected payment, then written them off as bad debt. The tax implications alone would destroy him, but I wanted more than financial ruin. I wanted poetic justice. I drove to Riverside, to Mother's house, my house, whatever Richard's forged papers claimed. The key still worked. Inside, nothing had changed. Her crossword puzzles on the kitchen table, reading glasses on the arm of her chair. Richard planned to sell it to developers, according to his emails. Tear down prime location, worth double as commercial property. Standing in her kitchen, I made my decision. Not only would I keep this house, I'd make it the headquarters of my new life. The one where Richard Mitchell became a cautionary tale told at divorce lawyers' conferences. I spent the next 3 days gathering ammunition. Every receipt, every contract, every text message. Richard's location services were still on. I could see him in Sedona, at a resort that cost $800 a night. The same resort where Melissa had checked in 12 hours after he did, according to her Instagram. She'd blocked me weeks ago, anticipating this moment, but forgot about my friend Carol's account. Living my best life, blessed new beginnings desert magic. New beginnings. She had no idea. The final piece came from Derek. Tom had hired his own investigator after finding charges for lingerie that Melissa never wore for him. The investigator had photos, videos, credit card records. Tom was planning his own revenge, but agreed to coordinate with mine. By the time Richard's retreat ended, I had enough evidence to destroy him legally, financially, and socially. But that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel what I felt. That moment when you realize everything you believed was a lie, and everyone you trusted was an enemy. Margaret Winters assembled my legal team in her conference room, like a general preparing for war. Stephen Chen, no relation to Patricia, handled the criminal aspects. Rebecca Martinez specialized in financial fraud. David Okonkwo was there for the divorce and asset recovery. They sat around the mahogany table, reviewing my evidence with expressions that shifted from professional interest to personal outrage. He transferred the inheritance where? Stephen asked, studying the bank records. To a shell company in Nevada through multiple transfers, Patricia explained. Classic money laundering, but sloppy. He used his own laptop, from his registered IP address. From the wellness retreat, I added, where he was supposedly finding inner peace. Rebecca laughed grimly. Inner peace is going to be hard to find in federal prison. The plan came together like a symphony. First movement. Freeze all accounts before Richard could move the money again. Second, file criminal charges for wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Third, nuclear divorce filing that would hit the same day he returned. Fourth, the business takeover that would leave him with nothing but the clothes on his back. But there's one more thing, I said, pulling out a folder. I want to buy out his business partners before he knows what's happening. David's eyebrows rose. You have capital for that? Mother's real inheritance. The half I moved before he could steal it, plus a line of credit backed by her house. The real deed, not his forgery. We spent 6 hours crafting the attack. Every angle covered, every move anticipated. But the best part was Tom's contribution, delivered through Derek. Melissa's messages to friends, bragging about landing a rich one and finally getting the life I deserve. She'd been shopping for wedding venues while still married to Tom. The same week, I met with Richard's 3 biggest clients. Lunch meetings he didn't know about, at restaurants he'd never take them to because they weren't impressive enough. I wore my best suit and brought Patricia's audit results. I thought you should know, I told each of them, sliding documents across white tablecloths, that Richard has been overcharging you by approximately 30%. Here's what you actually owe versus what you paid. As 50% owner of Mitchell Landscaping, I'm prepared to offer full refunds and renegotiated contracts. Their loyalty to Richard evaporated faster than morning dew. By the time he came home, I'd secured written agreements from every major client transferring their contracts to the restructured company, with me as managing partner. Sarah called the night before Richard's return. Mom, is everything okay? Dad sent a weird text about making big changes. Everything's perfect, honey. In fact, I'm making some changes too. Like what? Like remembering who I was before I forgot myself. She paused. I love you, Mom. Love you too, baby. Tell Emma her grandmother left her something special. I'll explain when I see you both. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Tomorrow, Richard would learn what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness. Melissa would discover that Instagram posts could be evidence, and I would reclaim not just my money, but my life. Richard's flight landed at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. By 3:52 p.m., he was served with papers in the airport parking lot. The process server was Derek's friend, a former linebacker who'd perfected the art of polite inevitability. Richard Mitchell? He asked as Richard loaded his suitcase. Yeah. You've been served. Have a blessed day. I watched from 3 rows away, slouched in a rental car he wouldn't recognize. His face went through the stages, confusion, recognition, then that beautiful moment of dawning horror. He ripped open the envelope right there, designer luggage forgotten on the asphalt, divorce papers, criminal complaint, asset freeze notification, eviction notice from the house. My lawyer argued I had exclusive use rights during proceedings. And my personal favorite, a cease and desist from operating Mitchell Landscaping without majority owner approval. His phone rang immediately. I knew because I was calling him. Hello, Richard? Linda? What the hell is this? It's what happens when you steal from your wife while she's grieving her mother. Though I'm curious, how was the spiritual wellness? Did you find yourself? This is insane. You can't what? Can't document your theft? Can't prove conspiracy with your mistress? Can't show the IRS your fraudulent invoices? Actually, you're right. I can't do all that. I paused for effect. But my team of lawyers can. The silence stretched like taffy. Then, it's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you transferred my inheritance to offshore accounts while pretending to be at a wellness retreat. It looks like you've been embezzling from our company. It looks like you and Melissa have been planning this for months. How did I know? Oh, Richard, you married an invisible woman who kept your life running for 23 years. Did you really think I couldn't see when something was wrong? I've known about Melissa since the first night you came home smelling like vanilla. I've known about the money since you started asking about Mother's will. The only surprise was how stupid you were about it. His breathing got heavy. Where are you? Closer than you think. But don't worry about finding me. Worry about finding a lawyer who'll take your case once they see the evidence. Oh, and Richard? Melissa's husband Tom filed for divorce this morning too. Apparently, he doesn't appreciate his wife planning a future with another woman's husband. You two can compare notes. I hung up and drove away, watching in my mirror as he stood in that parking lot, papers in his hand, sun setting on everything he thought he'd stolen. The best part? This was just day one. Tomorrow, the clients would get their letters. The IRS would receive Patricia's report. The state business registry would process my filing for full control of Mitchell Landscaping. But tonight, I was having dinner at Mother's house with a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. Richard found me the next morning at the office. My office now, since I'd changed the locks at 6 a.m. He stood outside the glass door, pressing the buzzer like a man possessed. I let him stew for 10 minutes before activating the intercom. "We're closed," I said pleasantly. "Linda, open this door. This is my business." "Actually, check your papers. It's our business, and I have majority control pending investigation of your embezzlement. Would you like to schedule an appointment?" His face went red. "This is ridiculous. You can't lock me out of my own company." "I can when you've been stealing from it. Patricia found everything, Richard. The phantom invoices, the skimmed cash, the accounts under Melissa's name. $22,000 just last month. Were you planning a honeymoon?" He slammed his palm against the glass. Behind me, my new assistant, definitely not sleeping with anyone's husband, asked if she should call security. I shook my head. "Let me in, and we can talk about this like adults," he tried, switching to his reasonable voice. "Like the adult conversation you had before stealing my inheritance? Or the adult way you planned to have me declared incompetent?" His face drained of color. "How do you know about the emails? Your detailed plans to gaslight me into a mental facility? Melissa's spreadsheet calculating how long before you could get power of attorney? Oh, Richard, you put everything in writing, on company computers, that I have legal access to." "I want my things," he said finally. "They're in a box by the dumpster. I kept the photos of the girls, but you can have the golf trophies." He stood there, this man I'd loved, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "You've lost your mind," he said. "When this goes to court, everyone will see you're having some kind of breakdown." I walked closer to the glass, close enough to see the panic sweat on his forehead. "You mean the court where I'll present bank records of your theft? Where Tom will testify about his wife's affair? Where 3 forensic accountants will detail your embezzlement? That court? I'll fight this." "With what money? Your accounts are frozen. Your credit cards are maxed from that spiritual wellness retreat. Your business partners are buying you out. And Melissa?" I smiled. "She's a little busy. Tom's divorce lawyer is even better than mine." His phone buzzed. I knew that ringtone, the one he used for important clients. Mr. Davidson, probably, calling to confirm his contract transfer to my management. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked sweetly. He looked at the phone, then at me, and for the first time in years I saw the real Richard. Not the charming businessman or the concerned husband. Just a middle-aged man who'd gambled everything on a stupid plan and lost. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right," I agreed. "The criminal trial hasn't even started. But this conversation? It's done." I walked back to my desk, Mother's carved oak desk I'd moved in that morning, and got to work rebuilding what he'd tried to destroy. Behind me, I heard his footsteps fade, then the squeal of tires as he discovered the repo man taking his Corvette. Like Mother always said, when you dig a grave for someone else, better make it wide enough for 2. The real revenge wasn't the lawyers or the frozen accounts. It wasn't even watching Richard's Corvette disappear on a flatbed while he stood in the parking lot with his mouth open. The real revenge was what I did with Mother's house. See, Richard had been salivating over that property for months. Prime commercial real estate, he'd called it, worth 3 times its residential value to the right developer. In his emails to Melissa, he'd already spent the money: a yacht, a condo in Cabo, maybe a little place in Aspen for ski season. Instead, I turned it into the Harper Foundation for Women's Financial Independence, named after Mother's maiden name, not the Mitchell name Richard had tainted. The paperwork was beautiful in its simplicity. Mother's house would become a transitional shelter for women starting over. Women leaving bad marriages, escaping financial abuse, rebuilding after loss. The first floor became offices for free legal consultation and financial planning. The second floor, temporary housing for up to 3 women at a time. The garden where Mother grew her tomatoes now had a meditation space and a playground for children. But here's the kicker. I registered it as a nonprofit with very specific bylaws. The foundation would offer special services for women whose husbands had committed financial fraud. We'd provide forensic accounting, legal representation, and counseling. Our inaugural fundraiser? A gala dinner at the country club where Richard had done all his networking. I sent him an invitation to the gala. Embossed cardstock, gold lettering, the works. The Harper Foundation cordially invites you to our inaugural benefit dinner. Theme, Rising from the Ashes, Women Surviving Financial Betrayal. Keynote speaker, Linda Mitchell, founder and survivor. His lawyer called within an hour. Mrs. Mitchell, this is harassment. It's a legitimate charity invitation. He's free to decline. Though the country club president, Mr. Davidson, I believe Richard knows him, specifically asked if Mr. Mitchell would attend. Apparently, there's quite a bit of interest in the topic. The night of the gala, 200 people gathered in the same ballroom where Richard had celebrated his business victories. I wore Mother's pearl necklace, the one I'd bought back from the pawn shop after finding our old receipts. My speech was simple. My mother worked her whole life to leave me security. Someone tried to steal that security while I grieved, but she didn't raise a victim. She raised a woman who knows that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. The donations poured in. Turns out, I wasn't the only woman with a story. By the end of the night, we'd raised enough to fund operations for 2 years. Sarah and Emma flew in for the event, radiant with pride. This is what Grandma would have wanted, Emma said, squeezing my hand. The local paper ran a feature story. Richard's photo wasn't in it, but everyone knew who the perpetrator was. Mitchell Landscaping hemorrhaged what few clients I hadn't already secured. Last I heard, he was working for another landscaping company, as a crew member, not management. Melissa's fall was even more spectacular than Richard's. Tom, her soon-to-be ex-husband, had not only hired the best lawyer in the state, but also a private investigator who'd been documenting her activities for months. Turns out, Richard wasn't her first married target, just the first one stupid enough to leave digital evidence everywhere. The investigator found her dating profiles on exclusive sites, all listing her occupation as entrepreneur, and her relationship status as it's complicated. Her wish list included generous mentors and established professionals ready for adventure. She'd been fishing in married waters for years, keeping Tom as her safety net while hunting for bigger prey. But Tom's revenge was surgical. He didn't just divorce her, he exposed her. Every receipt for lingerie charged to his credit card but never worn for him. Every girls' weekend that coincided with Richard's business trips. Every lie cataloged and presented not just in court, but in a civil suit for alienation of affection that named Richard as co-defendant. Richard tried calling me when that lawsuit hit. I let it go to voicemail. Linda, please. This is getting out of hand. Can't we handle this privately? Privately. Like he'd privately stolen my inheritance. Like he'd privately planned my mental incompetence. Like he'd privately destroyed our marriage for a woman who saw him as a wallet with legs. The beautiful part was watching them turn on each other. Melissa blamed Richard for the exposure, for being too obvious, for leaving evidence. Richard blamed Melissa for pushing too hard, for being too greedy, for posting those Instagram photos from Sedona. They couldn't even afford separate lawyers, so they sat in court proceedings side by side, radiating mutual contempt. Derek kept me updated on the spectacular implosion. She's living in her car, he told me over coffee. Tom got the house, the savings, everything. She tried to stay with Richard, but he's couch surfing himself. Where's he staying? Jim from the country club, but that won't last. Jim's wife knows you from the Garden Society. She's giving him 1 week before he finds somewhere else. The criminal trial was set for spring. Stephen Chen was confident. Between the wire fraud and the forgery, he's looking at 5 to 7 years. Melissa might get 2 to 3 as an accomplice. But prison wasn't the real punishment. The real punishment was invisibility. Richard had spent 20 years building his reputation as a successful businessman, a pillar of the community, a man who'd made it. Now he was just another middle-aged failure who'd thrown away everything for a cliché. The country club revoked his membership. The Chamber of Commerce removed him from their board. The photos from charity events, him shaking hands with the mayor, cutting ribbons at grand openings, disappeared from websites like he'd never existed. I saw him at Walmart, Carol told me, buying ramen noodles and generic beer. He looked right through me like I was a ghost. No, I thought, he's the ghost. A man haunted by his own choices, invisible in the life he'd thought he owned. 1 year later, I stood in Mother's garden, now the Foundation's garden, watching a woman named Grace push her daughter on the swing. Grace's husband had drained their accounts and fled to Mexico, leaving her with nothing but debt and a 6-year-old to raise. Now she had a safe place to stay, a lawyer working pro bono, and a job interview next week. "Miss Linda," she called out, "Sophia wants to show you her cartwheel." I watched that little girl flip through the air, landing with a proud grin that could have powered the city. This was what Mother's money was meant for. Not Richard's yacht or Melissa's designer bags, but moments like this, women reclaiming their lives, children learning they were safe. Sarah had taken over the Foundation's marketing, creating a website that helped women nationwide find resources. Emma ran our financial literacy workshops, teaching women to spot the red flags I'd missed for too long. My daughters had turned their grandmother's legacy into something that would outlive us all. "You saved us," Grace said, joining me by the tomato plants. "No," I corrected. "You saved yourself. We just provided the tools." That evening, I had dinner at my new house, a modest ranch, nothing like the McMansion Richard had insisted we needed. I'd bought it 6 months after the divorce finalized, paid cash, put only my name on the deed. The kitchen was small but sunny, the garden modest but mine. Derek called as I was washing dishes. "Thought you should know, Richard took a plea deal. 18 months in minimum security, 5 years probation, full restitution. And Melissa? 12 months, 3 years probation. But here's the interesting part. She's already got a new target. Some widower in Palm Beach she met online." "Should we warn him?" Derek laughed. "His kid's already hired an investigator." Apparently, word gets around. I hung up and made tea in Mother's china cups, the ones Richard had called old lady dishes, and tried to donate to Goodwill. Outside my window, the stars were coming out, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew long and lonesome. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for everything. R." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Sorry was just a word, and words from liars weighed nothing at all. The next morning, I'd wake up to applications for the Foundation's new scholarship program. I'd have lunch with my daughters, tend the garden, maybe paint the kitchen that soft yellow Mother always loved. I'd live my life on my terms, with my name on every document and my heart finally, blessedly, my own. They say the best revenge is living well, but sometimes the best revenge is living at all, fully, freely, without looking over your shoulder at the man who tried to bury you before your time. Richard thought he was stealing an inheritance. He didn't realize I'd already inherited everything that mattered: Mother's strength, her wisdom, and her absolute refusal to let any man make her small. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money he could ever steal.